Osiyo, my name's Jessica and welcome to my channel. Autumn is my favorite season, and in preparation for painting some fallscapes, I thought why not share some of my brushes with you. I like having some variety and textures, so I made 6 different brushes that are based on 3 different types of trees. I'll go through initially and show you how I made these in Procreate, and then afterwards address how you can convert them into Photoshop brushes, or just address making them as Photoshop brushes in the first place. So thanks for stopping by, and let's get started. The first tree we're going to explore is a maple. Out of all 3 trees, this is the only one that I ended up doing by memory, which honestly I don't recommend because it leaves, leaves a lot of room for error. For this variety of maple, I'm picturing a Japanese maple leaf which looks significantly different than a typical sugar maple. In order to capture this look, I draw leaves that have points on the ends. The design you create doesn't have to be perfect because leaves themselves have a lot of blemishes naturally. Sometimes including these will help your texture overall whenever you're brushing a stamp pattern over a canvas. After finishing your design, copy your canvas, then click on the brush tab and hit the plus symbol at the top. This is how you'll add a new brush. Head down to the shape category and import your canvas by choosing the paste option. With 2 fingers, click simultaneously and tap the shape you drew. This automatically inverts the image. So now it's up to you how you'd like to edit your brush. I like to use scatter and rotation to vary the brush stroke. This makes the stamp you've created spread evenly and sporadically, making it look more like natural foliage. Your spacing and jitter options located under stroke path will also allow you to alter the brush stroke in order to suit your needs better. At this point, I like to test it out by painting a few strokes onto the canvas, or even by drawing a quick sketch to see if it's actually a functioning brush. Next, we're going to create a new brush that mimics these same leaves, but as if they've fallen from the tree. I go through the same process as before, but this time I draw the leaves as if they're already lying on the ground. The idea behind this brush is to be able to draw fallen leaves not only quick, but also in perspective with a painting. After drawing a design you're satisfied with, create a copy of your canvas, click on the brush tool, and create a new brush. We'll import the canvas again through the paste option, and click once with 2 fingers to revert the image. The only thing we want to adjust in the shape category is to flip the X and Y axis. Scatter and rotate won't allow the brush to do a flat perspective, so we're going to ignore these settings for this brush. Play with the spacing of your image and jitter to create your unique brush movement. Test it out on the canvas and see how you like it. If you can't imagine using this brush in a painting, that means it still needs to be tweaked. Sometimes this could be simply going back to your brush's settings and making some changes, or it could be changing the design of your initial stamp to better suit your brush's needs. The second type of tree we're exploring is an oak tree. Oak trees look bushier, so I made a point to create rounded pieces in both the leaves as well as the shape of the overall design. After importing it as a new brush, using the same process as we did on the previous 2 brushes, I scroll down and flip both the X and Y axis. A second way to test out your brush as you create them is by using the space to the right to draw. After a little bit of drawing, I end up loving the brush as is and decide to move on to creating the fallen leaf version of this oak print. Instead of drawing it out like I did last time, I use a new technique by distorting the stamp I had previously drawn to a perspective that makes it look like the leaves have fallen. You can erase and add new layers to your liking in order to make the 2 brushes match, but still have enough of a difference that it doesn't look like you used the distort tool once and called it good. Create a new brush and mimic the settings we used for the fallen maple leaf brush. Test it out and make sure it acts the way you want it to during painting. If it doesn't, step back into the brush settings and play around with those options again. The third type of tree stamp we're making is an aspen. Aspens have a different shape that includes leaves bunched together in a particular way. I used tree pictures as reference to try and capture the shape of this compound leaf. After drawing something that I'm satisfied with, it's time to create a new brush as we have before and import the canvas. This brush is what ended up giving me the most trouble. I wanted the leaves to make branches with each stroke, which meant the brush stroke would have to be able to follow the direction of each pen stroke. What this ended up meaning for Procreate was going to the shape category and pushing the rotation slider all the way to the right. This makes your brush follow your stroke. From there, you can choose to flip the X and Y axis or just the Y depending on what look you want to go for. I ended up only flipping the Y axis. I make a few more adjustments on the brush and then begin working on the fallen aspen leaves. You can use the same technique of erasing and selecting different portions of this leaflet and then distort the perspective to make it look like the leaves are laying flat. I chose to leave a small bunch of leaves as if they fell still connected to each other. I thought this would give the brush some more depth and realism. Create a new brush and mimic the settings we used for the previous fallen brushes. Test it out until you're satisfied. This begins the Photoshop side of our discussion. I do want to clarify that if you make it first in Photoshop, you can then export it as an ABR file and just import that into Procreate. In my experience, the brushes seem to work just like they did in Photoshop, but I'm not sure if maybe it was just luck, like the type of brushes I made just translated well, or if maybe this won't work with every single brush. But if it does, then that just makes this a lot less work. So I think it's safe to say that if you are going to make brushes, make them in Photoshop first, just in case you can successfully convert them into Procreate brushes. But if you're looking to only make it in Photoshop, or maybe you already have some Procreate brushes and you would like to translate them into Photoshop brushes, I gotcha! Export a PNG of each stamp and transfer it over to your computer. Import that photo into Photoshop. If you're starting in Photoshop rather than Procreate, you'll have to do all the footwork here of drawing your stamp. Now that we have our design, go up to the Edit drop-down menu and click on Define Brush Preset. Give your brush a throwaway name, and then head over to your brush settings so we can adjust them in order to match our Procreate versions. I like to have my iPad handy to refer back to all the settings I chose for each brush. I could drone on about which settings are equivalents between the softwares, but instead, I put together this handy graphic that just tells you all that. Feel free to pause or screenshot this for your reference later. Also, just a quick note, I only listed the settings that I used for creating this brush pack, so not every possible setting equivalent is listed here. A second point I'd like to make is that whenever you're adjusting the settings to match, you can't always go by the numerical value that a software has given. Sometimes you have to go by the percentage of that sliding scale, meaning if the scale is in the middle and Procreate says that's 0, while Photoshop assigns that measurement as 100, just keep it in the middle regardless of what that measurement says. Whenever you're finished, remember to click on the small plus button in the bottom right of your brush settings and name your new and improved brush. If you forget to do this, once you click off your adjusted brush, it won't actually save anything that you've changed about it, so you'll have to go through all those options again. Now that I had the 6 brushes made, I wanted to do a full drawing of a tree for each one. Before using them in my own practice, I like to test how effective they are at creating a believable environment. I've included some speed paint footage of each tree just so you can watch these brushes be put to use. During this process, I ended up adjusting a couple of settings on the maple. I specifically needed the brush to taper in size if I was going to use it for sculpting a Japanese maple tree. The edges of that particular tree end up being somewhat pointed as it fans out, and I found that using a taper on the brush really helped accentuate that look. Clearly these brushes were intended to use for autumn, but who's to stop you from changing the color to green for other seasons like spring and summer? Oh, and in case you're wondering, the brush I used for all of the bark work on the trunks of the tree was the innate brush called Syrup, found in Procreate. I especially enjoyed drawing the little eyeballs on the quaking aspen. This really kind of looks like a birch tree also. I'm definitely not an arborist or tree expert, so I'd have to look up the differences visually, but I suspect that you may be able to use this brush for a birch tree. I hope this tutorial not only inspired you to make your own brushes, but put you in the mood for autumn, because it's a pretty great season, and that's coming from a totally unbiased point of view. I will have this brush set available on my Gumroad for free, so feel free to download it and adjust the settings however you want them to be. They're royalty free. You could use them in whatever you want. Personal projects, commercial projects. Practice with them and see what you can come up with. Thanks for watching, and please enjoy your next video. Bye!